Hey everybody, this is a little lesson on how to embed quotes in your literary analysis paper, specifically shorter quotes. When you're analyzing literature, you should always use quotes to support the interpretation of the literature. So your quotes from the text are your evidence about whatever point you're making. You could be making an argument, you could be explaining something. Whatever you are doing with your paper, you need some proof from the text. And quotes are useful in a number of ways. They add strength to your interpretation of the literature. They also connect your paper to the book, the novel, the play, whatever piece of literature you're writing about. And then they help illustrate important points you're making in your paper. Remember, you're painting a picture with your words, right? And those passages really help prop up whatever your point is that you're making. So there are several rules for using quotes. And the first rule is that your quote should be brief and to the point, like in this first example. This is a do. I had this rule that nobody could do anything phony when they visited me. If anyone tried anything phony, they couldn't stay. You want to try to avoid long quotes because they break up the flow of the paper. So like this one here is a don't. Too long. I mean, if you told old Phoebe something, she'd know exactly what the hell you're talking about. If you take her to a lousy movie, she knows it's a lousy movie. If you take her to a pretty good movie, she knows it's a pretty good movie. So you want to make sure you try to make those quotes brief and that you hit the important information. You want to make sure your quotes are brief, but you also want to make sure that they contain the essential words and phrases that you need, right? You've got to support your main points. That's what the quote's for. So this one, at one point, Holden puts on the hat while freezing cold, striving for the comfort it provided him. But it was freezing cold, and I took out my red hunting hat and put it on. That covers exactly what we wanted to get to. And of course, it goes without saying that quotes should always be in quotation marks. Basically, these are parts of sentences or full sentences, but you need to make sure whatever it is you're taking directly from the text is shown by using those double quotes. And quotes should never stand alone in a sentence. They need to be introduced. They need to be woven into the paragraph so that they show up as evidence and support, and they don't try to make a point on their own. So this whole passage is just a passage, and there's no introduction, and there's no explanation. These two rules really go together and kind of piggyback on the last rule. So you need to have a tag or some background information before you put your quote in. So it says to add a quote to your paper, you must give it an intro or a tag. Introductions or tags include the following: the speaker, could be the author as well, and or the background. So in this quote, you've got the author writes, and that introduces the passage. And in this quote, you've got a little more background. At one point, Holden explains how bright she is. Holden says of her. So just make sure that your quotes blend into your paragraphs, are part of your paragraph rather than standing aside from it. So here are two more examples of what this should look like. You've got an introduction. The reader can sense the lack of respect Jack has for the rules as he shouts. And then you've got the passage. Bullocks to the rules, we're strong, we hunt. And this is from Lord of the Flies. Both of these passages are. I also want to show you some things about punctuation as you're embedding these passages. So you need to make sure after your tag or after your introduction that you have a comma. So that's a lot like dialogue formatting rules. And then of course you need the quotation marks. And then immediately after, you just put the quotation marks, and then in parentheses you put the author's last name and the page number, and then you close your parentheses and you put a period. And that's true every time. There is one exception to that, and I'll talk about that in just a minute, but same thing here, if you'll notice, and here. And this is what it shouldn't look like, but sometimes does, and we want to really avoid this. So no introduction here, not setting up the passage at all, and then we go into this shows, which you just never want to use when you're doing an essay, and it just kind of summarizes what you've already put. So all of your explanation about the passage or about the example from the book should come before the passage, and then your passage is evidence, and then you transition to your next point, or you transition to the closing sentence of your paragraph. And this is straight from MLA. So this gives detailed information about short quotations. And basically, it's a summary of what we've talked about so far. You won't have a works cited page this time because you're only using a single source. So you don't have many sources, you just have one source. But if you can see again, even if you just have one source, you're still going to put the author's name and the page number. And the only reason the second example doesn't have that is because the author's name is used in the sentence before the reference is made. That doesn't happen very much, but with Catcher in the Rye, it could be that you use Salinger's name in the sentence earlier, then you would only use the page number at the end of the sentence. Most of the time at the end of your passage, you're going to put the author's last name and the page number. And as usual, I had a little help, and so I looked at a video called Integrating Quotes into Literary Analysis Part 1 and used some of that information from Mr. Baber. And then the information that I provided about MLA formatting quotations is from the Modern Language Association through Purdue Online Writing Lab, an excellent resource for all things writing. Hope you enjoyed the video.